Hello and welcome to our podcast episode number 37, the epic true story of Operation Market Garden's most daring mission. I'm Timothy, and as always, here with me, my friend Thomas. Today, we're going to talk about a film called A Bridge Too Far. As always, spoilers ahead. Bridge Too Far is a 1977 epic war film directed by Richard Attenborough about Operation Market Garden in World War II, which envisions 35. 0 men being flown 300 miles to capture key bridges throughout the Netherlands. The operation ultimately fails due to a combination of factors, including poor planning and unexpected resistance from German forces. Well, Tom, so did you enjoy A Bridge Too Far?
Well, Timothy, I must say that while A Bridge Too Far certainly had its moments of grandeur and historical significance, I found it quite boring at times. The film dragged on for far too long, with many scenes feeling repetitive or unnecessary. However, as someone who appreciates war films and the attention to detail they often provide, I can see why others might enjoy this film more than I did.
Yes, Tom, I have to agree with you there. While the scale of the operation itself was quite remarkable and the recreation of the period was impressive, it felt like they tried to cram too much into one film. The pacing was off for me as well. Some parts seemed rushed while others dragged on interminably. I also found myself getting confused about which character was doing what or why at certain points in the story.
Indeed, Tim. It's a shame because with such an interesting historical event as its subject matter, there was certainly potential for a more engaging cinematic experience. The cast was quite impressive too, with some great actors like Sean Connery, Michael Caine, and Laurence Olivier taking on roles in the film. But alas, it seems that A Bridge Too Far fell victim to its own ambition by trying to cram too much into a single movie.
Yes, Tom, I agree with you there. The cast was indeed quite impressive, and it's always nice to see such accomplished actors coming together for a film like this. But I think the pacing issues might have been due to the fact that they tried to cover so much ground plot-wise as well. There were just too many characters involved in various aspects of the operation, and I found myself having trouble keeping track of who was doing what or why at certain points in the story.
Precisely, Tim. I think that might have been one of my main issues with A Bridge Too Far as well. There were just so many characters introduced throughout the film, and while some were more prominent than others, it was still difficult to follow all their individual stories without getting confused or losing interest at certain points in the narrative.
Yes, I completely understand what you mean there, Tom. And speaking of characters, let's talk about the portrayal of some key figures in this film. For example, Sean Connery played the role of General Roy Urquhart, who was in charge of executing Operation Market Garden. How did you feel he did in the part?
Well, Timothy, I thought Sean Connery did a decent job portraying General Urquhart. He captured the general's stern and determined demeanor quite well. However, I felt that some of his scenes fell flat due to the lack of proper character development or emotional depth in those moments. It was almost as if they were trying to cram too much into a single scene without giving it enough time to breathe or for the audience to really connect with what was happening on screen.
Yes, I agree with you there, Tom. Sean Connery's portrayal of General Urquhart felt a bit one note at times as well. And speaking of character development, how did you feel about the representation of the German forces in this film? They were obviously an important part of the story, but I felt they were somewhat underdeveloped and stereotypical.
Precisely, Timothy. The portrayal of the German forces was indeed quite underwhelming for me. They were largely depicted as faceless enemies who were just trying to stop the Allied forces at all costs, without much in terms of characterization or backstory. This made it difficult for me to fully empathize with their plight or understand their motivations within the context of this story. It would have been nice if they had given them more depth and complexity as characters, instead of just treating them as obstacles for our heroes to overcome.
Indeed, Tom. And I think that's one of the biggest problems with A Bridge Too Far. It tries too hard to make everything about the Allied forces without really giving any consideration to the complexity of the situation, or even just humanizing their enemies a bit more. It's all well and good to portray them as brave soldiers fighting for their country, but there should also be some room for nuance and understanding on both sides of the conflict.
Exactly, Timothy. I think that would have made this film much more engaging and thought-provoking if they had taken a more balanced approach to storytelling instead of just focusing on one side of the conflict at the expense of everyone else involved. As it stands, A Bridge Too Far is an interesting historical drama with some great performances and impressive sets, but falls short in terms of its overall narrative and character development.
Well, Tom, I think that's enough bickering for now.
Let's move on to some interesting trivia about A Bridge Too Far.
Did you know that during filming, the cast and crew had to contend with extreme weather conditions? The production was plagued by heavy rains, which caused numerous delays and rescheduling of scenes. In fact, one of the key battles in the film was shot completely out of order due to bad weather.
No kidding, Timothy. That's quite a feat considering how meticulously they recreated the period details and military hardware for this movie. It must have been quite an ordeal for everyone involved. I also heard that some of the extras who played German soldiers were actually World War II veterans themselves, which adds an interesting layer of authenticity to their performances.
Indeed, Tom, that's quite fascinating. It must have been a surreal experience for those veterans to relive some aspects of their past on screen. I also read that the film faced criticism from some quarters for being historically inaccurate or glorifying war too much. What are your thoughts on this aspect of A Bridge Too Far?
Well, Timothy, while I can see where those critiques are coming from, I also think it's important to remember that films like these are meant to entertain as well as inform. Of course, they will take certain liberties with historical accuracy in service of the story, but at their core, they should still provide some semblance of truth about the events they depict. As for glorifying war too much, I think that's a bit of a gray area. It depends on how one interprets the film's message and intentions behind showing certain scenes or characters in a particular light.
Exactly, Tom. It's all about finding the right balance between entertainment value and historical accuracy, which can be quite challenging for filmmakers working on projects like this. In any case, I think we've covered enough trivia for now. What do you say we wrap things up by giving our audience a final verdict on A Bridge Too Far?
Well, Tim, while I appreciate the ambitious scope of this film and admire its attempts to tell a complex story from history, I have to agree with your earlier assessment that it fell short in several key areas. The pacing issues, character development, and one-sided portrayal of both sides of the conflict all contributed to my overall disappointment with A Bridge Too Far. However, as I mentioned before, there were some redeeming qualities such as the impressive sets, costumes, and performances from the ensemble cast. So I'd give it a 5 out of 10 stars for its efforts, but ultimately leave it as an example of what happens when ambition exceeds execution in Hollywood filmmaking.
Well, Tom, it seems we're in agreement on this one. While I can appreciate the grand ambition behind A Bridge Too Far and some of its individual elements like set design or acting performances, it ultimately fails to deliver a cohesive and engaging cinematic experience. It feels more like an overstuffed history textbook than a compelling war drama.
Exactly, Timothy. The script for A Bridge Too Far seems to have been written by someone who wanted to include every single detail from the actual historical event into the film. But as we've discussed earlier, trying to cram too much information into one movie can be quite detrimental. It would have been more effective if they had focused on key aspects of the story and fleshed them out more thoroughly, instead of attempting to cover everything in superficial detail.
Precisely. I think this is where Richard Attenborough's directorial style falls short in this film. He seems more interested in recreating historical events accurately rather than crafting an engaging narrative that resonates with audiences on an emotional level. There are some scenes in A Bridge Too Far that feel unnecessarily long or repetitive, which only serves to drag down the overall pacing of the film.
Yes, Timothy, I couldn't agree more. The pacing issues in this movie really detract from what could have been an otherwise compelling war drama. It feels like they were more concerned with making sure every single detail was accurate rather than focusing on telling a story that would captivate viewers. As a result, some scenes feel rushed while others seem to drag on interminably.
And let's not forget about the character development in this film, or lack thereof. As we discussed earlier, many of the characters in A Bridge Too Far come across as one-note caricatures rather than fully fleshed out individuals with their own motivations and backstories. This makes it difficult for audiences to empathize with them or become invested in their journeys throughout the film.
Precisely, Tim. The lack of character development is perhaps one of the biggest flaws in A Bridge Too Far. It's not enough to simply introduce a cast of famous actors and expect audiences to be captivated by their performances without any depth or complexity to their characters. We need more than just action scenes and historical accuracy. We want stories that resonate with us on an emotional level as well.
And I think this is where the script for A Bridge Too Far could have benefited from some additional rewrites or revisions before production began. By focusing too much on historical accuracy and not enough on storytelling, they lost sight of what makes a great film truly great: the ability to engage audiences emotionally while also educating them about important events in history.
Precisely, Tim. It's important for films like these to find that delicate balance between historical accuracy and emotional resonance with viewers. While I appreciate what Richard Attenborough was trying to achieve with A Bridge Too Far, ultimately, it feels more like an academic exercise rather than a compelling piece of entertainment.
Well said, Tom. In conclusion, while A Bridge Too Far may have been well aimed, intentioned, and had some impressive technical elements going for it, its bloated script and lackluster direction make for a frustrating viewing experience. It's a shame that such an ambitious project failed to deliver on its promise of being both historically accurate and emotionally engaging.
Now, Timothy, let's talk about the casting for A Bridge Too Far. There were quite a few big names involved in this film, which I think added some star power to the project, but also raised expectations about their performances. What did you think of the actors and how they portrayed their roles?
Well, Tom, as we discussed earlier, there were certainly some impressive performances from the ensemble cast. However, I felt that some of these talented actors were hampered by underdeveloped characters or just not enough screen time to really make an impact. Take Dirk Bogarde, for example, who played Prince Bernhard of the Netherlands. His role was quite small, yet he managed to leave a lasting impression with his subtle portrayal of a complex character struggling with personal demons amidst the chaos of war.
Agreed, Timothy. I thought Dirk Bogarde's performance was one of the highlights of A Bridge Too Far. He managed to convey so much emotion and depth despite having limited screen time. Sean Connery also did a decent job as General Sir Brian Horrocks, but like you said, his character felt somewhat one-note at times. On the other hand, I thought Laurence Olivier was indeed brilliant in his role as Lieutenant General Frederick Browning. He brought such gravitas and authority to the screen every time he appeared on screen.
Yes, Laurence Olivier's performance as Lieutenant General Browning was definitely one of the standouts for me, too. His commanding presence helped ground some of the more chaotic scenes in A Bridge Too Far and added an extra layer of authenticity to his portrayal. I also thought Michael Caine did a decent job as Major John Howard, although I felt that he didn't quite capture the essence of the real-life character like some of the other actors did.
Exactly, Tim. Michael Caine was serviceable in his role as Major John Howard, but I feel that he wasn't given enough room to truly shine or develop his character. Beyond being just another tough-as-nails soldier fighting for their country. But let's not forget about the supporting cast. There were some great performances from actors like Anthony Hopkins, who played Colonel von Luger, and James Caan as Lieutenant Colonel John Frost. Their chemistry on screen really helped elevate some of the weaker moments in A Bridge Too Far.
Indeed, Tom. I thought both Anthony Hopkins and James Caan brought an incredible level of intensity and charisma to their roles, which helped balance out some of the more generic characters in the film. Overall, while there were definitely some standout performances from certain actors in A Bridge Too Far, I feel that they were let down by underdeveloped characters and a script that didn't do justice to their talents.
Well, Timothy, I think it's also important to consider the cultural impact A Bridge Too Far had upon its release and even today. As you mentioned earlier, many of the actors involved in this film were already well known for their previous work, which helped generate significant buzz around the project. The all-star cast, combined with its ambitious scope, made it a highly anticipated release at the time.
Indeed, Tom. I remember when A Bridge Too Far first came out, there was quite a bit of hype surrounding it, not only because of the impressive list of actors involved, but also due to its epic scale and historical significance. It's interesting how this film managed to capture the public imagination, despite some of its shortcomings, as we discussed earlier.
Exactly, Timothy. The cultural impact of A Bridge Too Far can be seen in several ways. Firstly, there was a renewed interest in World War II history and events surrounding it due to this film's release. Many people who may not have known about the Operation Market Garden or its key players were introduced to them through A Bridge Too Far. Secondly, the film served as an inspiration for many future war films that followed in its footsteps, trying to capture the scale and complexity of historical events on screen.
That's a really interesting point you make about how this film influenced future works within the genre. Tom, it seems like Bridge Too Far opened up new possibilities for storytelling when it came to depicting war films with an emphasis on historical accuracy and grandiose scale. While some these subsequent films may have improved upon Richard Attenborough's execution here, they still owe a debt of gratitude to A Bridge Too Far for paving the way.
Unquestionably, Timothy. It's clear that even with its flaws and shortcomings, A Bridge Too Far left an indelible mark on both popular culture and filmmaking as a whole. Its ambitious scope and impressive cast made it a standout release at the time of its release, and while it might not hold up as well today due to changes in audience tastes or advancements in filmmaking technology, there's no denying its impact on how we tell stories about war and history through cinema.
Well, said Tom, in conclusion, while A Bridge Too Far may have fallen short of its lofty ambitions, both critically and commercially upon its initial release, it remains an important piece of cinematic history that continues to influence filmmakers even today. Its cultural impact cannot be overstated, as it paved the way for future war films while also introducing many viewers to lesser-known aspects of World War II history.
Now, Timothy, before we wrap up our discussion on A Bridge Too Far, I'd like to hear your final thoughts on this film. What do you think it did well? And what could have been improved upon?
Well, Tom, as we've discussed earlier, there were certainly some positive aspects of the film, such as the impressive cast and the meticulous attention to historical detail. However, I feel that these strengths were somewhat undermined by its bloated script and lackluster direction. If they had managed to strike a better balance between storytelling and historical accuracy, I think A Bridge Too Far could have been an even more compelling viewing experience for audiences.
Agreed, Tim. I think you've hit the nail on the head there. While the film had plenty of potential with its impressive cast and grandiose scale, it ultimately faltered due to its overambitious script and less than stellar execution by Richard Attenborough behind the camera. It's a shame, really, because, as we mentioned earlier, there were some standout performances from certain actors that deserved better material to work with.
Indeed, Tom. I think this just goes to show that even with all the right ingredients in place, an impressive cast, an epic storyline, and a talented director at the helm of film can still fall short if it doesn't manage to strike the right balance between these elements. It's important for filmmakers to remember that sometimes less is more when it comes to telling a compelling story on screen.
Well, said Tim, on that note, let me remind our viewers at home not to forget to subscribe to our channel if they enjoyed this video and want more engaging discussions about films like A Bridge Too Far. And of course, don't forget to hit the like button and leave a comment below telling us what you thought of this film or any other topics you'd like us to cover in future episodes. We love hearing from our fans.
Absolutely, Tom. It's always great getting feedback from our viewers. So please do let us know your thoughts on A Bridge Too Far and anything else you'd like us to discuss in future videos. And don't forget, if you enjoyed this video, make sure to share it with your friends and family who might also be interested in war films or historical dramas. Until next time, thanks for watching, and remember, happy viewing.